5 years is a long time and what have you achieved, but I see it as being a bit like the root growth at the beginning of when you sow a seed, and it takes quite a while for the roots to establish the network before you really start to see the vegetative growth. And we've been doing a lot of work building networks, running the Growing the Goods ELMS trial, engaging with other growers' organisations and with Defra. And I've been trying to do some modelling about what having many more market gardens could do to substitute for imports. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about, and then we'll go into the breakout groups. So, yes, the vision for the Horticulture Campaign first of all came at the Food Foundation have this campaign called Peas Please, which some of you may know about, and the campaign is to get people to eat more fruit and vegetables. And at the first Vegetable Summit they announced that Sustainable Food Cities were going to have a Veg Cities initiative. And I've been doing quite a bit of work with growing communities, and the idea of the food zones, and the idea of having a set of food zones around every city in the UK seemed to be quite an obvious aim to have. And at the moment, I'm sure you're familiar with these figures, we're importing 85% of fruit that we eat in this country and 43% of vegetables. And a lot of the countries that we import from are already suffering from water scarcity from climate change, and that's only likely to get worse, while at the same time a lot of growers are actually leaving the sector because of financial pressures. And so yes, at the moment UK fruit and veg production is 3.1 million tonnes, but if everyone were to eat the 5 to 7 portions a day that it's recommended we eat, we'd need 10 to 15 million tonnes. So we're clearly way, way off that. So this idea of the food zones has, can everyone see all right, or am I blocking it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's quite small, so you might need to tell us what it says. Those of us who have rubbish eyesight.
Yes, no, it is. Well, to be honest, the point of showing this diagram is not to have everyone read all the text, because it is very small, and you can go and read it all on the Growing Communities website if you want. But the idea is to show the concept of these concentric rings around a city or a settlement, and the objective is to try and get, I think it's 2.5% being homegrown by people in their own gardens, 5% being grown in urban gardens, 17.5% being grown in the peri-urban zone, and 35% in the rural hinterland. And the thing I like about the food zones model is it is pragmatic, and it's sort of meeting people where they are now. So it's not saying you can't have any bananas or oranges if you still really want them, but there's an acceptance that some people still do want these things, but it's a dynamic thing that's moving towards people being more bioregional in their diets. So what can't be produced in the rural hinterland and directly bought would come from national wholesalers or European growers or further afield, and that's, I think, 20%, 10% from Europe, and 5% is the idealised model. So after sort of starting to have this vision, and at this stage I was actually working partly for Growing Communities, partly for Land Workers Alliance, we had a visioning session and came up with this vision, which is, in a way, they're all really obvious things, and they're all things that I think everyone in this tent is aiming for anyway. So wanting to have tasty, fresh and affordable fruit and vegetables for all, having local produce boosting local economies, having a decentralised supply system, viable livelihoods, good honest employment and reasonably paid employment, not making you wealthy but just enough to live on, and food connection and education. And I think they're probably all things that everyone here can sign up to. But sadly at the moment we're a long way from that being achievable. So a few years ago, soon after the beginning of the horticulture campaign, the Defra horticulture team asked us, well, so if you were to have these market gardens that you're promoting, how much fruit and veg would that actually supply? Which was a really good question, because actually it doesn't seem like many people know. And I seem to have ended up diving into another rabbit hole of spreadsheets for the last few years, trying to figure that out. And to be honest, it has been a little bit depressing, because I've been trying to measure it against sort of something that is meaningful, like current production or current imports, and it is it's a very small proportion. At the moment what we're producing is tiny compared to the scale of what's being produced, and we do need to scale it up. Now, modelling is quite an imprecise art, but so this is quite crude, and it is literally multiplying columns of figures by each other. But I decided in the end, rather than to look at the proportion of the veg that we are currently producing, to look at what we could reasonably substitute that we're importing. Because another really good report that the Food Foundation did, called Farming for $5 a Day, it analysed all the veg that we eat here, and the things that we can grow here, the things that we grow some of the season but we import at other parts of the season, and the things that we probably can't ever grow, and then the things that we're increasingly able to grow because of climate change. And there's quite a telling table in there that shows what percentage of a lot of vegetables that we all know you can really easily grow in this country that we're not growing. For example, we're only supplying 30% of the lettuces that we need at the moment. The rest are being imported, and I can't remember all the other figures, but there are a lot of vegetables in there that we're importing that we don't need to. So there's a lot of potential for import substitution. So I've decided to model it to look at how much in terms of value, and again I've gone for value rather than tonnage, because it was just not looking very impressive when you looked at tonnage. But when you look at the value of the vegetables and using figures from growing communities from their sort of 20 years of trading, I've scaled that up, and then also looked at, as well as having a food zone system for every city, how many CSAs you would need for every village and town to get up to that 20% of current imports, so 20% of 6.1 billion. And it is a lot of CSAs. I mean, like 12,000 CSAs, and when you consider at the moment the CSA network only has 200 members, I think, we have got a very steep hill to climb. But I think this needs vision and ambition. When I talk about CSAs, the only reason I've used the term CSA is because CSAs are much more stable in terms of having regular customers who, for a classic CSA, they'd be signed up for a year. But it could actually be, in reality, the model would be much more messy. There'd be a mixture of market gardens selling through farmers markets, box schemes, there'd be some farm shops, there'd be people selling to restaurants. But in order to try and make a manageable model, which even when it's this simplified, it's still quite complicated, I've gone for CSAs and what I've termed food zones units, which basically have a total production value of...
Thanks. 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll just go on for a couple more minutes and then we'll break out. Yes, each food zones unit would be producing, I think it's £465,000 worth of vegetables and be supplying 1,600 households. So I'll just move on to the next slide. So yes, what this means in practice is massive scaling up, but not in terms of getting bigger businesses, but in terms of the number of businesses. Training massively more growers, but also aiming for that training to be of really good quality, not just churning out lots of mass-produced new growers. Increasing access to land and finance, developing better routes to market, and then public engagement is a really, really important piece in the whole jigsaw, because in order to be selling that much more homegrown organic produce, we also need people to want to buy it, and people need to really understand why this is good value. But although we're in a cost of living crisis, there is, and we also want to be growing a lot more for everyone, there are a lot of people, I think, still who could afford to buy it, so we need to be changing their minds as much as trying to enable people who are on a lower income to access it. But I think we need to be trying to do both those things. So we're already working on quite a number of fronts. So there's a group of what I call the agroecological allies. So that's the CSA network, Soil Association, the Organic Farmers and Growers, Lantra, and I'd really love it if there was someone joining us from the Organic Growers Alliance on those groups. And we've been working particularly to look at how we can lobby to adapt the fruit and veg aid scheme to make it more accessible to people who are selling directly. I can explain more about that if anyone wants to ask later. We've been building links with Sustainable Food Places to try and connect growers in different parts of the country with the local food partnerships. And we're going to be starting, as of Monday actually, having quarterly meetings with Defra, with the Land Workers Alliance, and hopefully in the longer run with the other agroecological allies. And there's also a coalition called the Agroecological Learning Collective, which is a sort of training network which is just about to start really growing. They've been meeting and developing over the months, and much, much more. So the next steps are in January. Well, we're actually next week going to be launching a 4-page brochure called The Market Garden Renaissance, which illustrates the food zones based on growing communities data and some case studies. And that's a short brochure that we're going to be using for lobbying Defra to try and get the fruit and veg aid scheme changed, because it was announced they were going to change that back in May. So it feels like there's a real window of opportunity to get that changed. And over the autumn, we're going to be connecting with organisations like the Organic Growers Alliance, the CSA network, with Land Workers Alliance members, and also trying to work out what the most appropriate policy asks would be in each of the 4 devolved nations. So in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland and England, the different contexts are going to require different approaches. So we'll probably end up producing 4 reports, one for each nation, which can then hopefully be used by growers in those 4 nations for lobbying their governments to get better, more supportive policies for market gardens. But part of the message that we're trying to get across is we don't expect governments to do it all. We're already doing a lot ourselves. We just need help overcoming the barriers that we face. So, the question is, can we do it? It is a massive ask to scale up from 200 CSAs to 10 to 12,000 and 200 food zone systems. But what I really would like to hear from you after you've had a chance to talk to each other is this a vision that inspires you, and what would make it work better if it doesn't inspire you? and how would you be interested in supporting it next spring. So I think if you break into breakout groups for about 10 minutes or so in either 3s or 4s, and then we'll just have a sort of general people putting their hands up and general discussion to finish off. So yes, if you want to turn to the people next to you and just digest a bit, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah.
So yes, I think if we do this as a fairly informal discussion, and if everyone could lift their voices so that everyone else can hear, and this guy here, what's your name?
Alfie.
Alfie's going to be filming, so is everyone happy to be filmed, or if anyone doesn't want to be filmed?
Just put your hand up.
Put your hand
I
up.
won't aim at you.
Brilliant. But it's actually going to be a really handy way of recording the discussion as well for me, so I don't have to take notes. So, yeah, so first of all, is this a vision that inspires you? Yeah. Is it something that you like, or does it just leave you cold?
I think we were inspired by the idea, but saw some challenges.
Yes. Okay.
say the least.
Yes.
We did
No.
also say that you should talk about home gardeners too, and it wasn't even me what said that.
Sorry, what's that?
We should talk about home gardeners too.
Yes.
Leading into this.
Oh, definitely. No, in the middle of the food zones, there are home gardeners. Yeah.
I'd say the vision certainly inspired. It's a lovely idea. What would make it work better? Some sort of way of seeing steps to achieve it, which deal with some of the issues of accessibility, the way people access food, the negative consequences of the decline of box schemes at the moment.
Mhm.
So we're facing quite a hard future at the moment, where the vision seems unachievable without putting in place or describing
Yes.
steps that could actually help us get towards 12,000 CSAs.
Yes.
You said 200 at the moment.
It's a massive
increase.
Yes.
So what if we were to say initially, this is the way we could be doing it, and right now we're going to be going from 200 to 400.
Yes.
And that's a big enough thing anyway.
Yes. So some sort of action plan.
And I bounce back very quickly, say, do you know our food 1200 in Monmouthshire?
Yes.
Because I think maybe that's good, because it's an example of a real world where the council has said, we want to try and do this.
Build on real world examples, yeah.
Is it
Okay, that hasn't fully worked yet.
Yet.
That's true. Yet.
Yeah, but our food is a very good developmental model that they're working on
Yes.
in Monmouthshire, and it's worth people understanding more how it works
Yes.
and what the council's doing, because without the local authority backing, I think it's
Yes.
much harder.
Yes.
I'm a member of our food, just to say, I went to the
great.
gathering the other day. It's ridiculous how great it is. But it's for people in Wales, and we're 5 miles over the border, so we get to go to the event for the free supper, but we don't get any money to support our football. That's heartbreaking.
Are they able to fund projects that start up?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah, over the Welsh side of the border, it's fantastic, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works?
It's a pilot scheme at the moment, so that's kind of quite a big caveat, and so they're going to be feeding back then and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know the details. There's just loads of money sloshing about, which we're really jealous of on the Herefordshire side of the border. So no, not really. Sorry.
No. We had a presentation from them a year or two ago, but it would be really good to catch up. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the point that you made about you get spreadsheets or whatever, but in reality things are messy,
Yes.
and you've got different areas of the country, and we were talking here about what's happening in Lancaster and Manchester, which is really well developed, relatively well developed. So not everyone can, not everyone's in the same position. So I think it's important. I would say the project really needs to look at two important, or maybe three important questions, further analysis. One is, even until the mid-70s, there were market gardens, viable market gardens in this country. Why did that change? No, it wasn't EU. No, necessarily been.
Supermarkets.
Oh, it might have been,
To
but the
retailers.
fact is, we don't know. Could have been the supermarkets, whatever, but could have been price of land. I don't know. But actually, there are some interesting drivers
Yes.
there as to why that. If you go back to the 50s, all towns, all cities, all villages had market gardens supplying local markets, and that carried on through the 60s, and I said in where I lived in the 70s, very vibrant. So, what's the factors that cause that decline? So we don't repeat that mistake.
Yes.
Secondly, there has been a number of initiatives throughout, from the 80s into the 90s, trying to do this kind of thing, develop local systems, local markets. Some have survived, some haven't. It's not clear to me why the ones who survived have survived and why the ones who didn't survive didn't. That could simply be personality, or it could be region, or it could be they were ahead of their time. But again, it's important to know that, and I think you should look more about
Yes.
that. Now, the reason I'm saying you should know about that is if you're asking for financial support, a lot of money floating around in Monmouthshire, but is the money being used in the region in the way that is most needed in that region?
Yes.
So does a particular region need more money for infrastructure, for shared storage, for example? Or does it need for income support for the farmers or whatever? Those are critical questions in terms of developing a real life, real situation. And I think
Yes.
I think that the idea is great, the vision is great, the campaign is great, the narrative is brilliant. It needs some of those hard questions in work in the thing it needs to follow.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And no, I mean we've got this thing, the Agroecology Research Collaborative, which OGA is part of, and it would be brilliant to try and link up with some academics to try and get that kind of research done. Or if anyone
I wouldn't
knows,
trust academics.
not well, or get funding to get. But I mean, we're very much about farmer-led research. Yes.
Just maybe one small comment. It's not clear to me, honestly, what precisely the vision is.
Right.
So
Okay.
what are the details that are kind of theoretical ways of reaching the vision versus the vision itself? And so I'm not even sure I could quite answer the question, does the vision inspire me yet?
Yes.
It's not, like, is 12,000 CSAs the vision, or is that just an example of how we maybe would get there? Or is that the vision that you're asking us about?
Well, so the vision is aiming to produce the value of vegetables and fruit that equals 20% of what we currently import. So I think it's 1.3 billion pounds worth. And based on the figures that we have from CSAs and from growing communities, scaling that up to come up to that equates to about 200 what I call food zones units. So one set of those concentric rings for every city and every London borough and every large town. And then every village and medium and small town would have between 1 and 10 CSAs supplying it. And this is not even going anywhere near supplying all the vegetables that we need to even feed us all as a country at the moment, let alone if we were to eat 5 and 7 a day. So the vision is to achieve 20% of import substitution, which would be a massive scaling up from where we are now. But it would also bring an enormous amount of environmental and social benefits. So I mean, I'm trying to encourage the Farm Carbon Toolkit to get all of their data about carbon sequestration, but from what I've seen, I mean, here at Tolhurst Organics, it's a carbon negative farm, and I think there'd be a lot of data to show that nearly all the growers here are actually carbon negative. They're generating biodiversity, there's much better connection with customers, better education and understanding, there are health benefits. So the report that we're going to be launching in January has case studies showing all of those benefits, but you can have lots and lots of public goods, but we still need to feed people, and so the vision is replacing 20% of imports with market garden produced produce.
With
through,
market garden produced
yes,
produce.
but supplemented by farms. So I'm seeing a hand here and a hand there.
Mark.
Yes, Mark.
value of the food that we need to produce? Is that based on the imported value? Is it on conventional, or is it organic value? Because that makes a big difference.
Yes, well, you've actually pointed something, very key out. It's based on actually conventional value. So I've used the Defra figures for the import value, but actually you're absolutely right. The organic value is a lot higher. Yeah. I mean, ideally, I'd much rather be doing it on tonnage, but it was just looking so depressingly small that in order to try and make a case of some sort, I shifted. But I think you've actually picked up quite a major flaw in the whole approach, which, yes, I need to look at. Mark, and then...
Yeah, I'm all for great visions, but I would like a greater sense of reality.
Yes.
I think in the vision, for me, what's missing at the moment is that it's not clear about how the method of production, which of course should be organic.
Yes.
But I'm also, I don't feel there's a strong sense of consumers' buying habits, which have changed fundamentally and out of order. And we have to be realistic that if this is not addressed, then you can start all the production in the world, but actually if it doesn't feed into the customer base, then it's all a waste of time. So I think you have to address people's buying habits and maybe make the changes and so on. But if you don't take that into account, then we don't stand a chance of making any headway.
Yes. No, I mean, I think getting people to buy it is a big part of the challenge. I'm going to go to you, and then Gabriel, and then Substance.
Yeah. In so much as it requires a change of land use, some of it's going to be people growing their own veg and so on, but if your vision involves a lot of current agricultural land being devoted to market gardening, what seems really clear historically is that farmers are very, very responsive, landowners are very, very responsive to government grants. And you can change what they're doing very quickly by giving them the financial incentives to do it. So I think a huge amount of the success of this will depend on whether the new grant schemes actually incentivize.
Yes, and actually having some sort of part of ELMS to actually encourage farmers to let part of their farm become a market garden.
Because I understand in the past there were no CSAs, common agricultural support for horticulture at all.
I'm feeling very hopeful that is going to change. Janet Hughes actually has said a couple of times in the last 2 or 3 weeks that they are going to get rid of the 5 hectare threshold. You're nodding your head as well. So we've thought it was coming before, but I do feel quite confident that it might actually happen next year. You again.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think there are a number of things here, and it all feels quite nebulous. And I wanted to pick up on the thing that Rebecca's saying, CSAs. Why CSAs? We've just heard that the people's shopping habits and cost of living are an issue. Many CSAs manage to provide a reasonable living for their farmers growers while providing box schemes to their members at really affordable prices. They may not be exactly Tesco prices, but they are really affordable and they're not specialist organic high prices. That is an important way in. You can't tell people they have to change their eating habits if it's going to cost them 50% more and they can't afford it. So there's that side of things. The other side of things is the whole shift of the land use, and I think there are, as some people have said, there are more and more farmers who are looking to see what they can do to improve things. And if there was a sort of overall scheme suggesting that each farm, there was more than 150 acres, designated 5 or 10% of its land to vegetable growing, whether the farmer did it or whether it was a subcontract that came in, subtenancy for a CSA or a market gardener, that gives some sort of connection to what people could do. And some farmers might love to go into diversification, and some farmers would say, oh no, vegetables not my thing, but I don't mind having a young couple who come in and do it. So I think we have to look at the practical steps. How can we make this happen? How can we make it doable for current farmers, but also for vegetable growers and for the consumers? How can we make it doable so that they can actually follow their hearts for better food, because it can be affordable? Then you've got the last point, and CSAs provide connection for families to where their food comes from, for children to see how it grows. That's me finished.
Oh, thank you, Gabriel. Sos and then Tolly. Oh, yeah, Tolly.
Yeah, I'm going to stand up because my voice is a bit crazy. What you're proposing, Rebecca, is fantastic, and I very much support it. But we're doing something, we're proposing to do something here which has been done before, and everyone's forgotten about the experience that country went through during the 1930s and early 1940s, when agriculture was completely transformed. And what you're describing sounds very much like what happened during those years, in that there was lots of very small units around towns and villages producing fruit, vegetables and grains, and all that was done primarily from the top down. I'm not suggesting that might be the right way, but it was done from the top down. Farmers were controlled by the Ministry of Food. What happened to them? We need them again. The Ministry of Food and the Ministry of Agriculture between them completely changed the way we thought about food, the way we consume food, and the way we produce food. And we went from being something like 35% self-sufficient food in 1939 to being over 85% self-sufficient by the end of the war. A remarkable achievement. That was under the threat of starvation. We are under a much bigger threat now in terms of climate change, yet nobody's really taken it anything like it seriously as we took that situation. So we've been there before, we've done this. It took a huge concerted government effort. Everybody was behind it. There was such a lot of public support for that idea. Everybody was happy with food rationing. Nobody questioned it. Even the royal family got a book of coupons. Everybody went along with that idea with no dissent at all. I'm just wondering what it is about the climate emergency we're facing is not as important as that.
It's a very good question, and I think the government haven't quite woken up to the fact that the climate really is this crisis yet, and we need to be saying, and we need to be showing that it is. Kate.
I just think you've hit the nail on the head. They're talking about food policy instead, and I think the thing with the decision is it comes from so many. You need to join everything up.
Yes.
Because I don't know about in England, but in Wales we have agriculture policy and we have food policy.
Yes.
They're in a food bill. Like, why do we have an agriculture bill and a food bill? To my mind, that's ridiculous.
Yes.
Because the two sides of the same coin, they have to be together. We have to have housing policy, because it's all very well the farmers putting aside 5 acres for the people to grow food on, but if they can't have anywhere to live, then so it's making this joined up thing. And I have to say, I think from what I've heard from my mum, I'm not sure that everyone did sign up to the wartime thing. I think that she always says they'd steal the coal from out under your nose if they took it, and they stole your ration book too. But actually, I think that is a point to worth remembering, that everyone didn't go along with it, but you have to carry enough people, but joined up thinking all the way along. You can't just have food or agriculture or housing. You have to have everything, and you have to sell it and tell the story.
It's a revolution, B.
Yes, I think that's what we need.
Ideally.
Yes. And
I'm just not sure that reducing imports by 20% is that inspiring, to be honest. Like, the climate is the thing that's getting people, heated up in this tent. Personally, the idea of a market garden on every 100-acre farm, I also find kind of inspiring.
Yes.
But reducing imports by 20% feels a bit technical to me.
Right.
I wouldn't build an inspiring campaign
that's really
around
helpful.
that.
Thanks. Yes. So I mean, one thing that maybe if we were to really try and get the data together to show that the carbon negative nature of market gardens, do you think that would be a better way?
Yeah, personally, tying it a bit more to market gardening would be a bit more inspiring and tying it to climate. But just reducing exports by 20%, that could just be growing more field scale veg, non-organically. It isn't necessarily a good thing at all.
This government doesn't really care about imports. They want to import. So you're going to have a struggle with this one. We need another government, basically.
Well, hopefully we're going to have another government.
I say that.
Well, I think maybe if we push towards community and citizen cohesion, irrespective of what the policies are, we might get greater bandwidth. So rather than letting somebody from the top tell you what you need to be doing, if you can, and I have no idea whether you can, if you can run a campaign at the same time that encourages citizens to consider sustainability and the benefits, and I personally try and frame everything as positive, rather than reduce imports, go for increase local community support. It's the same thing, but it has a very, very different perspective and very, very different inspiration. But if you can get people to purchase more locally, better quality food, and ideally in season, because that's the big issue that British growers have with people dependent on retailers, where they want the same thing 52 weeks of the year. But also, I think one of the things we did touch on was more cooperation within the small growers. Because one of the biggest access issues I see is that the retailers control the vast majority of the channel, and they want simple, large contracts. Now, there's talk about biodynamic purchasing within the councils, but my understanding is even the trials are going to be 2, 3, 4 years ahead. So whether that technology can be brought forward, I don't know. But also, if you're going to have lots of small market gardeners, they need to be cooperating with each other, because not everybody, even within the same area, is going to have the same soil, can grow the same crops. And so rather than trying to fight it, if you've got a wetter area, grow crops that are wetter. If you've got a sandy or a chalky area, grow them. And then the CSA or whatever unit you've got is not necessarily having to be completely independent, but is working with a community. And that's the bit that I struggle with as a very small grower, new into the market, that actually we can't produce enough to make it viable to be a box scheme or anything, and we're struggling to find other people in the area. So that cohesion, I think, would be really, really beneficial.
Brilliant. It's 5 to 4, and I think there's another session happening soon, but there are also, if you can keep your contributions really, really short. So you've had your hand up, and then Dom.
I do think the literal aim of 20% for local imports, I do think that's good. A lot of campaigns are very vague. Campaign for food sovereignty, it's like, I think literal is good, it's achievable, but the ideal combo is something like imaginable and inspiring. So a market garden in every town. Literal and inspiring. The second thing I was going to say in terms of like market gardens everywhere, there's a huge market of middle class people who really want to connect to nature. I run a third of an acre vegetable garden. I've got on this like Facebook group for local women to like come and do a volunteer day. There was so much interest. People just want to be in nature and connect to it, and a lot of those people also are middle class and have money and funds. And that's a good thing to tap into. You can make a market garden also something small can come in and do.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Dom, and then Pete, and then I'm going to have to finish.
On the subject of demand and supply and everything, I think there's more demand for what we do out there than you would think. And just anecdotally, our experiences from setting up our market garden, we do a vegetable scheme of about 75 boxes, and about a quarter of those go to the village that's a mile away, and then the further away from us you get, the fewer customers we've got. And I don't think it's coincidence that the nearest village just happens to have loads of vegetable eaters. They want it because it's so close to them. And those people would go to the supermarket otherwise. 1 or 2 we nicked off Riverford, the majority of them would otherwise be going to the supermarket, and they've chosen to go from us because we're close. And I think market gardens will find out that people in there who are really close to them will come to them when they're there. So there's more demand than you might think, because like you say, they can then follow their hearts, which they can't do at market gardens.
Thank you. And Pete,
at the risk of being a doom monger, because I wouldn't want to be that, right, is that food security hasn't been mentioned yet. but I suspect it's at the back of what Tolly's been saying about climate change. Is that essentially Andalusia is in real big trouble. You know, around Europe we've had massive problems all summer, and we need more food resilience in this country, and that is something that some government at some point is going to have to pick up, because ultimately we can't keep relying on imports. You know,
Well,
I think that's a way of getting traction. You know, with a certain government. You know, I don't know which one it will be, but I know this one's not going to do it. So there's got to be some other way of finding a way through that. You know?
Well, in a sense, that's the import substitution piece. Because the imports, we can't rely on them.
But I think that needs spelling out. You know, in a sense, it's great to have the import substitution, but we need to spell out why we are trying to do this. You know, because ultimately we are going to be driven by climate change. You know,
absolutely.
Unless we get to grips with that.
And
incorporate also our ameliorating effects on the climate. You know, that's got to be a big issue as well.
No, but we need to amplify that.
So food security, not oil security.
Just a very quick thing.
Let's not talk about food security, because that's a conventional term. That means anything. You want food security by
resilience.
Food resilience is brilliant, leading to food sovereignty. That's one thing. Second bit of vision you should drop is you talk about carbon sequestration. You talk about that forever, but it's nonsense. It doesn't actually. It's just terrible. It's cul-de-sac. Third thing about the community question. I think adding to the vision is some kind of concept of equitable trade. So it doesn't mean every grower has to grow so many varieties and so many species. This kind of cooperation between people growing the right thing. There needs to be a kind of statement as to what that means. You know, as a kind of part of the vision.
No, very good point. Well, that's kind of what food zones are, is that equitable trade, the better food traders. Thank you so much, everyone, for all your contributions. We're going to be launching the report and the campaign at the Oxford Real Farming Conference, so please do come along to that, and please get in touch, and I'll try and adapt it according to, I'm going to have the recording of what you've all said, so please just keep coming to us and feeding into it, because we want this to be more than just a Landworkers Alliance campaign. But thank you for all your feedback today.